Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
What do we stand for is not only a proverbial question asked of us by Lin-Manuel Miranda in Hamilton. This week becomes a halachic question. What do we stand for when the Torah is read? How many passages do we stand for when they're read? Do we stand for the miracles of the plagues? No. Do we stand for the verse when we are actually freed, delivered out of Egypt? No. We stand this week for Shirat Hayam. I can see many people counting in their minds right now. That's great. You're following along. We stand for the two recitations of the Ten Commandments, Aseret HaDibrot, and we stand for each of the endings of the 5 books of the Torah. So the question is, why do we stand for the miracle of Shirat Hayam, but we don't stand for the miracle of the plagues or the other miracles, beginning with manna and continuing all the way through the end of the Torah? There are commentators with all kinds of explanations, and of course, I'll begin with the one that I just told the kids in Tat Shabbat in the other room. I explained to hundreds of little children all running around that unlike the plagues that struck our enemies, the miracle of the sea was like a warm hug, an embrace by God. We walked into the middle of the sea, and God opened up God's arms for us. I didn't say it exactly like that, but they understood. Rashi has 2 explanations, which means ultimately there isn't one. Rashi explains, Ashir al Adonai ki ga'o ga'a. He explains that verse that I sing for God because God is certainly highly exalted. His first explanation is that the miracle exceeded our expectation. Because when human beings fight an army of chariots, our goal is simply to knock the riders off of the chariots, away from the horses. But God lifted the chariots, the people, and the horses and threw them all into the sea, defeated them all at once. And his second explanation is that this miracle just gives us a taste. It's just the tip of the iceberg of what God is capable of delivering. So we stand out of respect because for the first time we see a breakage of nature like we had not seen before. And we stand because we could only imagine what beholds us, what God is capable of. The Sfat Emet in the Hasidic tradition takes it one step further and says, we stand not because of the song of the sea that's in the Torah. We stand out of respect in anticipation of the song of the sea that we might one day sing as a people when our final delivery comes. There is a doubling effect that each of them recognizes, Rashi and Sfat Emet. They recognize that there is either a higher expectation above our own, there is either a higher capability than the one we see, there is a future verse to the one that we're singing, and in either case, both of them explain that's why the coupling effect, that's why it's written in the Torah as couplets, is to acknowledge the 2 parts of the song. I'd like to argue that the reason that we stand for Shirat Hayam and for Aseret HaDibrot, for the 10 Commandments, is that it's been seldom in our history a tradition that we stand united as a people. It has been tremendously infrequent. One of the strengths of our history is the diversity of our thinking. And so when the miracle occurs of the splitting of the sea, for me, it's not a miracle to think that God could break nature. After all, We're talking about God. The miracle is that the Jewish people could stand together and sing one song. Because after all, we're talking about Jews. The miracle of Aseret HaDibrot isn't that God gives us the divine gift of Torah. The wisdom of God, after all, it's God. The miracle is that we all stood at once in silence and heard the divine word because, after all, we're Jews. We're never silent. There are moments in our history that call upon us to remember, to challenge us, that there will be times in the future when we have to pull together as a people. And as I begin a national speaking tour about prioritizing peoplehood in this moment, it's not lost on me that this idea feels challenging to many people. There is a sense in this moment that whatever unity we have enjoyed since October 7th of last year, it's beginning right now to dissipate or to fracture. It's beginning right now to be challenged. As we see the 3 hostages released this morning, Ohad Ben Ami, Or Levi, and Eli Sharabi, we see the gaunt, frail, starved looks about them. And there will be op-eds that flood Jewish publications that it is incumbent on us to return to war immediately. To watch the celebrations of terrorist organizations, for hostages to be handed diplomas of survival, for there to be these ceremonies, these mock ceremonies, meant to stick their thumb in our eye again and again and again, for many of our people will become too much to swallow. And it will be required of us to maintain a strength, a sacred strength, to withstand it and endure it in order for the delivery of the remaining living hostages to be accomplished. It was only a month ago that we sat as a VBS community with Eli Sharabi's family. That we sat with Eli Sharabi's family, and they expressed the concern to us that they didn't know if he knew that his wife and his daughters had been murdered on October 7th. And this morning, it has been confirmed that upon his freedom, his first question to the IDF soldiers, his very first question was, were his wife and daughters waiting for him at the hospital? The shock, the trauma, the sadness of this unfolding tragedy for our people will cause many of us to believe that our strength needs to be expressed exactly in this moment. Yet after having the experience of sitting with approximately a dozen hostage families over the last 15 months, I can tell you that there's no greater strength for our people at this moment than to swallow these horrific, horrific images and to try to bring them home now. I have received many emails from congregants asking my opinion of different writers and different books that are being released at this time in the post-October 7th world. I can assure you of one thing. If any Jewish writer wants to become rich and famous as quickly as possible, the easiest way to accomplish that is to criticize our own people in our only homeland. And so for that reason, Peter Beinart's book is simply a faux fracture. It's not the fracture that we face. Peter Beinart separated himself away a long time ago. And the reason why I teach my children to stand up for the Jewish people and the state of Israel isn't because I want them to become best-selling authors, regular guests on CNN. It's because it's noble and it's right. And when a person accomplishes their fame based on defaming their family, making false accusations, repeating the lies of our adversaries, they simply are doing it for all the wrong reasons. We have to be concerned about the fracture of our people that stand together, that have stood together for so many months. And now that we welcome the survivors of captivity home, we have to extend our strength to them. There will always be calls for war. War will always be an option. Moments for peace and recovery are fleeting. We have to take full advantage of this one that we find ourselves in. For what do you stand for? I stand for the Rabbis and the Levis and the Ben Amis. I stand for my people and the tradition of those who set down that we should all stand for Shirat Hayam. They intended to teach us exactly that same lesson.